I think a big picture today.
Yeah, I think so. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to say that Mr. Farage has agreed to take questions from the floor. So we have some microphones that can get to you so everybody can hear your question. Please raise your hand. There's one over there straight away, and the microphone will just be coming in a second.
I grab a piece of paper just now, please. I don't use notes, but I need to write questions.
Right.
Thank you. The transatlantic partnership negotiations started in July. Do you think they'll ever be completed? And if they are, would they ever be completed to your satisfaction?
Well, I was in Ottawa earlier this year. I went to a conference organised by the great Preston Manning, who of course set up the Reform Party in Canada, to be told by everybody he was wasting his time. Under the first past the post system, the Reform Party never had any chance of unseating the established Conservative Party, and of course they went on to become the biggest party in Canadian politics. Canada reformed excessive public spending, they maintained sensible control over their banks, and Canada is now a country in a fantastic position. And it was really interesting because I shared the platform with John Howard, you know, 4 times election winner in Australia, and in my view, you know, one of my political heroes over the course of the last 20 or 30 years. You know, a plain-talking Aussie who tells it how it is and is almost dignified when they lose at cricket, almost. And we were talking about this whole trade thing. You know, and of course there are negotiations going on with the States, but there are also negotiations going on between the European Union and Canada. They've been going on for some years. And the point Preston Manning said was, look, you know, given how this world's changed, Britain could have signed a trade deal with Canada a decade ago, and it wouldn't have taken very long, and we didn't need the European Union to have it. And to hear Mr. Cameron, who I'm not really a great fan of, I have to confess, you know, to hear Mr. Cameron stand up and champion, isn't it marvellous? Because of Brussels, we might have a trade deal with America. Well, not if the French have got anything to do with it, is how I would answer that question, which is why it will take years. But to hear Mr. Cameron saying that without the EU, we can't have trade deals is total and utter baloney. The Swiss, the Norwegians, and many other countries prove it. You need to be flexible, you need to be adaptable in a changing, fast-moving, modern global economy. And I think getting back trade not only is good for us as a country, but actually it's also good for our place in the world. I'm getting a bit sick of this argument from Paddy Ashdown and people like that, that unless we bomb everybody, we've lost global influence. You know, I'm not for that, I've got to tell you. I'm not a pacifist, far from it, but I'm very, very upset that we've intervened and interfered in an endless series of foreign wars, and what we could do, and particularly as the country that speaks English, and with this Commonwealth of 2 billion people, which now has countries wishing to join it, who were never ever part of the empire, so this is no relic of the past, what we could do is use soft power. And soft power would be trade. And if we really cared about the poor in the world, then rather than pouring £1 billion a month away in foreign aid, a colleague of mine, Godfrey Bloom, spoke about this recently, got into some trouble, so I'll be careful. Rather than giving £1 billion a month in foreign aid, most of which will not go to the right place and will be used up in corruption, if we really cared about the poor, what we could do is reduce the hideous tariffs we put on green beans that are grown in Africa and give those people a chance to trade their way out of poverty. I want our trade policy back, not just for us, but to exert soft power in the world to genuinely help some of the world's poor. I really do.
Another question over here.
Hello, Mr. Farage. You said earlier that the problem with the European Union is a lack of democracy, and in the same breath you're saying that the European Union, when people vote in European elections, they seem freer to vote. Is that not a self-defeating argument that in fact the solution to our problem is a greater democratisation of Europe instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
If they had wanted to democratise the European Union, the moment to do it was when they drafted the European Constitution, and I challenged them in the European Parliament again and again and again through that process. I said to them, if you use this opportunity to democratise the European Union, to make the government of Europe come from within the European Parliament, and to make people feel they were actually, you know, directly in connection with European policy and where it was going, I said, whilst I won't support it, because it still will not recognise the idea there are different nation states. But whilst I won't recognise it, I think if you did that, and you had that vision, and you put it to referendums in the big countries, your side of the argument would probably beat mine. But they didn't do that. No, no, no. They stuck with the ideas of Monsieur Monnet, going back to the early 1950s, when in fact he'd been thinking about them for many years before that, and the European Union was set up as a deliberately, not undemocratic, it isn't undemocratic Europe, it is anti-democratic. It is set up with a French mindset, a French intellectual mindset that says the people don't know what's good for them, and we, the ruling class, do, and we can't have this ridiculous concept that, you know, we have an election, and the tanker goes in this direction, and then after 4 or 5 years we have an election and the tanker goes in this direction. No, 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 no. I mean, the Soviets only had 5-year plans. These people in Brussels have got 25-year plans. And they can't have nation-state democracy messing it up. So the argument that you can democratise and change the European Union from within is to fundamentally misunderstand the project. And look at it. Where is the sole source of any new legislation? It lies with the bureaucrats. It lies with the unelected European Commission. If they weren't prepared to cede an ounce of ground on that when drafting their own constitution, they will never ever do so. You cannot reform this European Union. It can't be made better. Frankly, it needs to be torn down, and we need to start again. We don't need a blank sheet of paper. We've actually got a very good model. You know, the Council of Europe was set up in 1948 as a means where nations could sit round a table and talk to each other. We can use that as a template to make a much better Europe for everybody.
I think we are out of time, Mr. Farage.
Oh,
thank you.
You're throwing me out, are you? I always get thrown out, you know, wherever I go.
I've just been told the plan has changed. Who else has got a question for Nigel Farage? Over here, please, in the middle, on this side of the aisle. The microphone is just coming up to you now, sir. Sorry about that. These things happen.
That's all right. Well, in the Parliament, they cut the microphones off, so it's all right.
Yeah. That might be coming if you go on too much.
Where are we? Yeah.
Yeah. On the assumption that the UK came out and the EU didn't immediately collapse, what's your answer to the facts from Brussels argument? The idea that if you're outside the EU and still seeking to trade with it, you have to wait for the faxes to come through to tell you what the latest change to their standards is before you can continue selling them your goods.
This is a complete misunderstanding of how trade works, and it's still the mindset that we'd be stuck inside the single market and somehow we'd effectively still be part of the customs union. I don't want to be in the customs union. I don't want to be linked politically. I want a simple free trade agreement. If they want to buy our goods, yes, of course, we'll have to conform to their standards. Just as if we sell goods to Japan or sell goods to America, we have to conform to their standards without having any say over what goes on directly inside, you know, their parliaments or their own trade committees. That said, much of this is now done at WTO anyway. You know, a huge amount of trade rules are actually decided, you know, between sovereign states together via the WTO. And you know, the idea that's put around that if we weren't part of this political union with old Rumpy in charge, they wouldn't buy our widgets, you know, I mean, completely misunderstands, of course, firstly, the balance of trade, which is we now have a staggering trade deficit with the European Union of 45 billion sterling a year. It is 200 billion over the last 5 years. We also have the fact that the UK is now the biggest export market in the world for France and Germany combined. They sell us more than they sell to America or China or anywhere. And the real reason why we will be able to have a simple trade agreement without the political attachment is because German industry will demand it. Can you imagine Merkel going to Mercedes and saying we're about to enter into a trade war with Britain? I mean, forget the fact that under, you know, WTO and the modern world it wouldn't actually be under the rules anyway, but you know, there's no way that's going to happen. Economic pragmatism said that it can, and actually, even though the EU has been slow at putting together trade deals, the EU already has 50 free trade agreements around the rest of the world. I would have thought their biggest export market has a pretty good sporting chance within a couple of weeks of being number 51.
Another question from anybody? In the front here, please. Let's wait for the microphone to come to you, sir, please.
It sounds like you need to set up a French independence party alongside UKIP.
Well, I'm hoping that there may be one in the Czech Republic at some point in time, but I mean, I haven't pressed the President on that point. Yeah, we need independence parties right across Europe. Of course we do. You know, and again, it's about this terminology. You know, they think independence means isolation. No, it doesn't. You know, we live in an interconnected world. The problem in France, I mean, the Eurosceptic debate is moving ahead in France very, very quickly, but it is, of course, being dominated by Marine Le Pen. Now, I sort of make this absolutely clear. I've got much more time for Marine Le Pen than I ever had for her father. I think she is generally, you know, more open-minded. It'd be tough not to be, wouldn't it, really? But more open-minded about society and tolerant of other people than her father was. And what she says is that she wants to reform the French Front National, and she herself said in an interview in the Telegraph, she wants to turn the Front National into a party like UKIP and not being a party like the BNP. And I wish her luck with doing that. My difficulty is, I have a feeling that some of the roots of anti-Semitism are so strong in that party that she's got a bit of a job on her hands. But, you know, whichever way it manifests itself, I am confident that we are going to see opposition parties right across the continent doing well in the European elections of 2014. And personally, I mean, I would really rather enjoy walking in to the European Parliamentary Chamber, if it happens, as the head of the biggest single delegation from the United Kingdom, and perhaps the biggest delegation from any country in the whole of Europe. Wouldn't be very tenable for us to stay too long after that, would it?
Shall we take one more?
One more, right, thank you.
The gentleman there in the middle, please.
Yeah, a short question about how you see the future of the city inside or outside the EU.
Well, the great and the good, of course, told us in 1999 and 2000 that if we did not join the euro, the city would cease to exist. The foreign banks would all leave, the business would all dry up. We had to join the euro. And this is what the big bosses were telling us at the time. And now we see the city as being the place where the biggest number of transactions denominated in euros take place. I would say this to you. I spent 20 years in this business, and whilst I completely understand that the politicians and the central bankers allowed bankers in New York and London and elsewhere to do stupid things, what upsets me is the rest of the city is being tainted by association with the word bankers. You know, we've got world-leading products here in the City of London, whether it's insurance, reinsurance, whether it's metal broking that I used to do, whether it's fund management, equities execution, foreign exchange trading, spread betting. You know, as I know you could go on, I could go on, and we're good at that stuff. And it's Britain's biggest industry. And it's not just about high earners in the City of London, it's about back offices in Bristol and Cardiff and Norwich and all over the country. And all of that, Britain's biggest industry. And what did we do in October 2010 under this coalition and this Prime Minister? On a three-line whip in the European Parliament, the Conservatives voted to transfer total regulatory power and control over Britain's biggest industry to the charming Monsieur Barnier and 3 new European regulatory authorities. We need to understand something in the City of London. They hate us. They hate us. They hate what they see as Anglo-Saxon capitalism, and they will do their very best to destroy it. And just in the last few years, we've seen much of our reinsurance industry relocate to Bermuda. We've seen more than 1 in 4 of our hedge fund managers moving to Zurich, moving to Geneva, and even worse, moving to Singapore and never ever to come back. The City of London will not survive the statist, anti-capitalist, anti-success onslaught that it's going to face from the European Union. And given that we don't have anything more than qualified majority voting, there is nothing on most of this that the British government can do. So now it isn't just your small business, now it's your city trader and broker, for whom it matters not a damn whether we have Cameron or Miliband in 10 Downing Street, because we've given control of that industry away somewhere else. And I want to get it back. I think we should be in control and setting the rules and setting the agenda for Britain's biggest industry. Thank you.